Hey everyone, Wolf Lord Rho here. Today we're discussing the time the legend Commissar Yarrick came up against the greater good. A spoiler warning to begin, as the events we're discussing today are from the short story The Gallows Saint by author David Annandale. As always, I really recommend you read the stories for yourself first without spoilers, as that's the best way to enjoy the lore for yourself. But with that said, let's just jump straight in. Now, when it comes to Commissar Yarrick, I don't know about you, but the enemy that undoubtedly sticks out in my mind is the Orcs. Sure, he's had some grueling campaigns against the forces of chaos, and quite likely all the enemies of mankind, but it's his infamous war against Gazkul that looms the largest. One foe I certainly didn't anticipate seeing Yarrick tangling with was the Tau Empire. However, that's exactly what transpires within the short story The Gallows Saint. We don't see Yarrick within the heat of a campaign, but instead, actually even more fascinating, we see him in the immediate aftermath of it, dealing with a world that had turned to the Tau Empire, forsaken the light of the Imperium, and had thus been forcibly, brutally brought back by the Militarum. And in the history annals of the Imperium, that's it, job done. The moment of victory has taken place. A victory's a victory after all. However, as we know, the reality is never that straightforward. I watched the triumph on Abydos with mixed feelings. Understanding the purpose of spectacles does not mean enjoying them, but attendance was the course my duty took on this day, and I would not shirk it. Besides, Abydos had earned this triumph. The soldiers of the Armageddon Steel Legion, of the Mordian Iron Guard, and of the Vostroyan Firstborn deserved it. The defense militia of the Abydos Rampart deserved it. The people who had weathered the war deserved it. The battle to reclaim Abydos from the Tau had been hard. The 3 regiments involved had poured hundreds of companies into the campaign. The Xenos had hurled their formidable technology against us. But that wasn't the full reason why the war had been so bitterly fought. The actual Tau force on Abydos had been relatively small. We had outnumbered them many times over, but a significant portion of the Agriworld's population had welcomed the Tau. They had embraced their Xeno philosophy. And this was another reason why, now that the shooting had finally ceased, the spectacle of the triumph was needed. The Great Purges had begun, and would continue for some time to come. Cleanup crews were busy expunging the circular Tau iconography that had spread like a plague on walls and arches across the planet. The millions who had turned their back on the Emperor and the Imperial Creed would be executed. It was vital then that the population be shown the glory of victory, the strength of the Imperium, and the celebration of faith. So a hard-fought planetary campaign, and for the most part the Imperium was fighting its own people. That is a hugely important part of the Tau conflicts to remember, and one that perhaps we do quite easily overlook when seeing a Tau campaign, because of course for the most part the Tau choose to expand via diplomacy, where they can, spreading the word and knowledge of their greater good. The Imperial planets, just as Abydos here, willingly embracing this new philosophy, coming to yearn to be a part of it. And so if or when the Imperium arrives to reclaim its lost world, they, more often than not, find themselves fighting a huge part of their very own population. To Yarrick and any other military commander or power that be, the world most likely bears little difference to one fallen to the ruinous powers. Betrayal of the Emperor is all the same, no matter what calls they may shout from their lungs. By the punishment meted out, execution, you'd say it's exactly the same. The millions who turn their back on the Emperor and the Imperial Creed would be executed. As we know in the Imperium, there is no forgiveness, no understanding, only punishment, only death. And I find the logic in this all being part of the great display of triumph particularly interesting, because Yarrick reveals throughout his thoughts here that in reality it comes down to a matter of strength. It was vital then that the population be shown the glory of victory, the strength of the Imperium, and the celebration of faith. They need to make a glowing show of victory, an example of those who lost, as a sign of the Imperium's might, its glory, to ingrain the message the Imperium is bigger, stronger, and the Tau, all Xenos, are weak. To betray the Emperor is to meet his punishment. Call it propaganda, call it simple intimidation. It is how the Imperium operates. It always has. Was the Great Crusade really any different? Mighty Space Marine legions 100,000 strong, if not more, demanding loyalty of any system they came across, or annihilation to those who opposed. All in the name of their Golden Emperor. The more things change, the more they stay the same. But as these celebrations on Abydos continued, as the governor of the world, Lord Antonin Skroff, proclaimed the Emperor's glory for all to see, he was assassinated by a sniper's bullet. And although surprised by the assassination before his very eyes, the fact that the governor would be assassinated didn't shock Yarrick, knowing full well the rebellious elements still needed true cleansing. However, what did shock Yarrick is within a matter of moments he was told the sniper had been caught. An infantryman from the Planetary Defense Force, apparently caught with a Kroot rifle in his hands to boot. And to Yarrick it all feels a bit too easy. And even more so when he's told of reports of the suspect claiming of the greater good before the Tau uprising. I raised my eyebrows. Really? That was damning indeed. It marked him as one who had traitorously embraced the Tau philosophy. That would explain his motive to assassinate the governor. The report is reliable? Multiple witnesses. Turns out the report was filed against him about a month before the Tau attacked, but it wasn't a high priority case. I see. Given the Imperium's bureaucracy and the sheer number of related reports of heretical utterings that poured in, this was exactly the kind of information that would wind up buried by more urgent items, and whose importance would only become apparent in retrospect. And yet there was an odd detail. He spoke of the greater good before the Tau struck. Mondon nodded, not entirely happy either. Evidence of advanced infiltration, no doubt. Have there been any other signs that this occurred? He looked even more uncomfortable. Not yet. My suspicions deepened. The picture that was emerging of the assassination was both too easy and too messy. Mondon brought me to the prisoner's cell and left me to my interrogation. I stepped into the small rockcrete space. There was no furniture, Paulus Holton sat on the stained floor, a chain running from his ankle to the wall. His right arm was broken. His wounds had been cleaned, presumably to keep him from dying of an infection before he could be executed in the square. He was of average height and very thin. His hair was lank, and his pallor suggested he rarely saw the sun. When he looked up, the expression in his swollen eyes surprised me. I had expected fear, perhaps defiance, possibly a desperate and self-interested repentance. What I saw instead was hope. Now, this, you can imagine, is quite striking for Yarrick. Eyes filled with genuine hope at the sight of him. A commissar so often bestrides that line of inspiration and fear within the militarum that he's all too often encountered with fear, intimidation, obedience, authority, and even in moments of battle, it's rarely hope a commissar brings. Instead, a steely affirmation, representing a physical symbol and a reminder of duty, penance to the Emperor. Yet hope, pure and utter hope, is truly rare. So you can understand why it surprises Yarrick here, especially from a supposed assassin, an enemy of the state. The sight of a commissar to him should inspire dread, if nothing else. Yet it doesn't. And so Yarrick spoke to the prisoner. "I didn't do it," he began. "Please, you have to—" "My name is Sebastian Yarrick," I interrupted. "I am a commissar of the Militarum Tempestus, and you will stand when addressing me." He gulped, struggled to his feet, and managed an approximation of a salute with his broken arm. He did all of this, I noted, with the energy of a man ashamed to have momentarily forgotten his place. "I'm sorry, Commissar," he said. He squinted at me. "I meant no disrespect." "Why did you kill Governor Schroff?" I asked. "But I didn't, Commissar." He turned a sob into a great shaking breath and spoke with passion. "In the name of the Emperor, I have never, by word or deed, been anything but a loyal subject of the Imperium." "The greater good," I said. He frowned. "I beg your pardon. You were overheard proselytizing for the greater good." He looked puzzled. He continued to squint at me. "Oh, yes, I have. Often. But I thought, I've always believed the sacrifice of the individual for the greater good of the Imperium, a tenet of our faith." I blinked. "It is." And there it is, the startling similarities at the core of the Tau's belief, and the Imperium's, that the individual should give for the greater good. The fundamental difference is, whereas the Tau ask all to work and take their place within the Empire, to prosper for the greater good, the Imperium demands your sacrifice for the Emperor's, your life to be spent in penance for the sacrifice he gave. And there is no asking about it. One empire running on hope, prosperity, unity. The other, fear, punishment, death. All under the guise of faith. It's remarkable how similar the philosophies of the two empires are when you cut to the core. It's just the implementation of the two that makes them so different. Sure, the Tau has some darker motives within the ethereal hierarchy, but it's hard to argue the stark contrast on outlook, at least on the face of it. In fact, a great question to ask and debate is how similar would the Emperor's vision of the Imperium be to the greater good of the Tau? Sure, the welcoming in of Xenos would have been highly unlikely, dedicated as he was to humanity. But the more hopeful outlook of playing your part for the greater good of the race, for prosperity, I could see a lot of shared ideals there. Perhaps in a way that's why so many Imperial worlds listen to the Tau, seeing or feeling an echo of a life they should have been able to lead, an empire they see the hallmarks of. But this particular situation goes on to show exactly how similar, yet different that version of the greater good is between the two empires. Yarrick, immediately identifying this prisoner, Paulus Holton, was not the assassin, not only by his demeanour, but also by the simple fact he had extremely poor eyesight, physically unable to be a sniper. Goes on to investigate the arresting soldier, eventually unravelling a coup attempt by the governor's son. It's a great little mystery story, the kind of whodunit style that I love to read, so one I definitely recommend checking out if you can. But in true grimdark Imperial fashion, despite uncovering this conspiracy, Yarrick knows the world needs to heal, that it can't afford the corruption to become public knowledge in the immediate aftermath of the Tau's defeat. And so, covering up the traitor governor's son's death as an accident, Yarrick returns to the prisoner Holton to tell him he will still be executed. Only one other citizen of that world would know the truth besides me and Vernak. I told Holton when I visited him in his cell the next day, and I told him that he would be alone to possess that knowledge. I won't be freed, he said. No, your execution will cauterize the injury of the assassination. If it were revealed that his son plotted his death as part of his effort to conceal his own treachery, the wounds would fester. Everything I said was the absolute truth. I did not question the necessity of Holton's martyrdom, but this was, at that time, the most difficult speech I had ever made. I swallowed my self-disgust. I did my duty. I added a new callus to my soul. But I did not hesitate. I felt no pride in what I was doing, but at least I did not hesitate. Sometimes, the knowledge of duty performed is all we have. Then I will die for the greater good of the Imperium, Holton said. I did not like the choice of words. The phrase had become toxic on this planet. Still, Holton was correct. Yes, I said. Good. His embrace of his own duty did not make me feel any better about mine. Now, if that doesn't perfectly encapsulate the Imperium, I don't know what does. That is the sacrifice for the greater good the Imperium demands of you. If they need to take your life, they will take it. In the name of the Emperor. An empire that hates the Xeno, brands their philosophy as a heresy, and yet willingly has loyal innocent men and women killed under the mask of traitor for its own cause, its own greater good. You understand now why they say there's no good guys in 40k. Commissar Yarrick, a hero of the Imperium, an icon, a man whose legend lives on strong, even still, despite his apparent death, having Halton hanged, despite knowing he was innocent. You really have to ask, how many moral heresies have taken place across the Imperium in the name of the Emperor? How many do on a daily basis? Sure, the Tau are far from perfect, but when it comes to the causes of the greater good within the 40k galaxy, it's easy to understand why so many worlds of the Imperium are flocking to the Tau's banner. Because at least there, they offer you a life to live, not a life they demand to take. But as always everyone, what do you think? Are you surprised a hero such as Yarrick could perform such a duty? Or is this merely a glimpse of the reality behind so many of the Imperium's heroes? Is performing the darker duty in the name of the greater good the cold hard truth of service within the Imperium? Can you see the similarities between the Tau and the Imperium? And do you think perhaps the Tau does indeed reflect a closer empire to the Emperor's original vision? Do you think Guilliman can ever turn the Imperium away from the darkened state of existence? Or do you think it is too late? And will the Tau Empire continue to take worlds from the Imperium through the small but important difference in philosophy? As always everyone, leave your thoughts in the comments below. Huge thank you to all my subscribers, your support truly means a lot to me, it really does. If you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. If you enjoyed this particular vid, then why not drop a like on it too. But with that said, I am off, and I'll see you all again real soon.